Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, today we'll be beginning the fifth juz. So we'll be starting from ayah 24 of Surah An-Nisa. I'll go ahead and get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والمحصنات من النساء إلا ما ملكت أيمانكم كتاب الله عليكم وأحل لكم ما وراء ذلكم أن تبتغوا بأموالكم محسنين غير مسافحين فما استمتعتم به منهن فآتوهن أجورهن فريضة ولا جناح عليكم فيما تراضيتم به من بعد الفريضة إن الله كان عليما حكيما ومن لم يستطع منكم طولا أن ينكح المحصنات المؤمنات فمما ملكت أيمانكم من فتياتكم المؤمنات والله أعلم بإيمانكم بعدكم من بعد فانكحوهن بإذن أهلهن وآتوهن أجورهن بالمعروف محصنات غير مسافحات ولا متخذات أخدان فإذا أحسن فإن أتين بفاحشة فعليهن نصف ما على المحصنات من العذاب ذلك لمن خشي العنة منكم وأن تصبروا خير لكم والله غفور رحيم يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم سنن الذين من قبلكم ويتوب عليكم والله عليم حكيم والله يريد أن يتوب عليكم ويريد الذين يتبعون الشهوات أن تميلوا ميلا عظيما يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم وخلق الإنسان ضعيفا يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم مدخلا كريما ولا تتمنوا ما فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبوا واسألوا الله من فضله إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما ولكل جعلنا موالي مما ترك الوالدان والأقربون والذين عقدت أيمانكم فآتوهم نصيبهم إن الله كان على كل شيء شهيدا الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا وإن خفتم شقاق بينهما فبعثوا حكما من أهله وحكما من أهلها إن يريدا إصلاحا يوفق الله بينهما إن الله كان عليما خبيرا واعبدوا الله ولا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا وبذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا الذين يبخلون ويأمرون الناس بالبخل ويكتمون ما آتاهم الله من فضله وأعتدنا للكافرين عذابا مهينا والذين ينفقون أموالهم رئاء الناس ولا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ومن يكن الشيطان له قرينا فساء قرينا وماذا عليهم لو آمنوا بالله واليوم الآخر وأنفقوا مما رزقهم الله وكان الله بهم عليما إن الله لا يظلم مثقال ذرة وإن تك حسنة يضاعفها ويؤتي من لدنه أجرا عظيما فكيف إذا جئنا من كل أمة بشهيد وجئنا بك على هؤلاء شهيدا يومئذ يود الذين كفروا وعسوا الرسول لو تسوى بهم الأرض ولا يكتمون الله حديثا يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون ولا جنبا إلا عابري سبيل حتى تغتسلوا وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم إن الله كان عفوا غفورا ألم تر إلى الذين أوتوا نصيبا من الكتاب يشترون الضلالة ويريدون أن تضلوا السبيل والله أعلم بأعدائكم وكفى بالله وليا وكفى بالله نصيرا من الذين هادوا يحرفون الكلم عن مواضعه ويقولون سمعنا وعصينا واسمع غير مسمع وراعنا ليا بألسنتهم وطعنا في الدين ولو أنهم قالوا سمعنا وأطعنا واسمع وانظرنا لكان خيرا لهم وأقوم ولكن لعنهم الله بكفرهم فلا يؤمنون إلا قليلا يا أيها الذين أوتوا الكتاب آمنوا بما نزلنا مصدقا لما معكم من قبل أن نطمس وجوها فنردها على أدبارها أو نلعنهم كما لعنا أصحاب السبت وكان أمر الله مفعولا إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء ومن يشرك بالله فقد افترى إثما عظيما. ألم تر إلى الذين يزكون أنفسهم بل الله يزكي من يشاء ولا يظلمون فتيلا. انظر كيف يفترون على الله الكذب وكفى به إثما مبينا. ألم تر إلى الذين أوتوا نصيبا من الكتاب يؤمنون بالجبت والطاغوت ويقولون للذين كفروا هؤلاء يهدى من الذين آمنوا سبيلا. أولئك الذين لعنهم الله ومن يلعن الله فلن تجد له نصيرا. أم لهم نصيب من الملك فإذا لا يؤتون الناس نقيرا. أم يحسدون الناس على ما آتاهم الله من فضله فقد آتينا آل إبراهيم الكتاب والحكمة وآتيناهم ملكا عظيما. فمنهم من آمن به ومنهم من صد عنه وكفى بجهنم سعيرا. إن الذين كفروا بآياتنا سوف نسليهم نارا كلما نضجت جلودهم بدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما. والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سندخلهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا لهم فيها أزواج مطهرة وندخلهم ظلا ظليلا. إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل إن الله نعم ما يعظكم به إن الله كان سميعا بصيرا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. ألم تر إلى الذين يزعمون أنهم آمنوا بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك يريدون أن يتحاكموا إلى الطاغوت وقد أمروا أن يكفروا به ويريد الشيطان أن يضلهم ضلالا بعيدا. وإذا قيل لهم تعالوا إلى ما أنزل الله وإلى الرسول رأيت المنافقين يصدون عنك صدودا. فكيف إذا أصابتهم مصيبة بما قدمت أيديهم ثم جاءوك يحلفون بالله إن أردنا إلا إحسانا وتوفيقا أولئك الذين يعلم الله ما في قلوبهم فأعرض عنهم وعظهم وقل لهم في أنفسهم قولا بليغا. وما أرسلنا من رسول إلا ليطاع بإذن الله ولو أنهم إذ ظلموا أنفسهم جاءوك فاستغفروا الله واستغفر لهم الرسول لوجدوا الله توابا رحيما. فلا وربك لا يؤمنون حتى يحكموك فيما شجر بينهم ثم لا يجدوا في أنفسهم حرجا مما قضيت ويسلموا تسليما. ولو أنا كتبنا عليهم أن اقتلوا أنفسكم أو اخرجوا من دياركم ما فعلوه إلا قليل منهم ولو أنهم فعلوا ما يوعدون به لكان خيرا لهم وأشد تثبيتا وإذا لآتيناهم من لدنا أجرا عظيما. ولهديناهم صراطا مستقيما. ومن يطع الله والرسول فأولئك مع الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا. ذلك الفضل من الله وكفى بالله عليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا خذوا حذركم فانفروا ثبات أو انفروا جميعا. وإن منكم لمن ليبطئن فإن أصابتكم مصيبة قال قد أنعم الله علي إذ لم أكن معهم شهيدا ولئن أصابكم فضل من الله ليقولن كأن لم تكن بينكم وبينه مودة يا ليتني كنت معهم فأفوز فوزا عظيما. فليقاتل في سبيل الله الذين يشرون الحياة الدنيا بالآخرة ومن يقاتل في سبيل الله فيقتل أو يغلب فسوف نؤتيه أجرا عظيما. وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. الذين آمنوا يقاتلون في سبيل الله والذين كفروا يقاتلون في سبيل الطاغوت فقاتلوا أولياء الشيطان إن كيد الشيطان كان ضعيفا. ألم تر إلى الذين قيل لهم كفوا أيديكم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فلما كتب عليهم القتال إذا فريق منهم يخشون الناس كخشية الله أو أشد خشية وقالوا ربنا لم كتبت علينا القتال لولا أخرتنا إلى أجل قريب قل متاع الدنيا قليل والآخرة خير لمن اتقى ولا تظلمون فتيلا. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة وإن تصبهم حسنة يقولوا هذه من عند الله وإن تصبهم سيئة يقولوا هذه من عندك قل كل من عند الله فما لهؤلاء القوم لا يكادون يفقهون حديثا. ما أصابك من حسنة فمن الله وما أصابك من سيئة فمن نفسك وأرسلناك للناس رسولا وكفى بالله شهيدا. من يطع الرسول فقد أطاع الله ومن تولى فما أرسلناك عليهم حفيظا. ويقولون طاعة فإذا برزوا من عندك بيت طائفة منهم غير الذي تقول والله يكتب ما يبيتون فأعرض عنهم وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا. أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. وإذا جاءهم أمر من الأمن والخوف أذاعوا به ولو ردوه إلى الرسول وإلى أولي الأمر منهم لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته لاتبعتم الشيطان إلا قليلا. فقاتل في سبيل الله لا تكلف إلا نفسك وحرض المؤمنين عسى الله أن يكف بأس الذين كفروا والله أشد بأسا وأشد تنكيلا من يشفع شفاعة حسنة يكن له نصيب منها ومن يشفع شفاعة سيئة يكن له كفل منها وكان الله على كل شيء مقيتا وإذا حييتم بتحية فحيوا بأحسن منها أو ردوها إن الله كان على كل شيء حسيبا الله لا إله إلا هو ليجمعنكم إلى يوم القيامة لا ريب فيه ومن أصدق من الله حديثا صدق الله العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So we just completed the first half of the first half of the fifth juz. And the fifth juz pretty much, for the most part, entirely comprises of Surah An-Nisa. And for those of you who have either read the tafsir or have done a study of the Quran, at least personally speaking, I think Surah An-Nisa was one of the first surahs that can both be so incredibly controversial, but also so incredibly beautiful at the same time. And the reason I say that was, about maybe five or 6 years ago when I first began to just read a little bit more intensively in terms of the tafsir and meaning of the Quran, and try to really understand, what we were reading. I was on this mission to really figure out why, when people have criticisms of Islam, they point to certain verses in the Quran. When they point to certain verses in the Quran, we know, right, that this is divine, and we know that there's truth to it. But, some people have the question that, okay, if there's a certain verse that's there, you can't take away from the fact that it's there, right? If there's something that's very easy to misinterpret that's there, there has to be a reason why it's there, right? And when doing that, there was not a single verse that I found in the Quran that clarified itself. What's a better way to put this? I didn't find, as I continued to read and find those verses that seemed like they were controversial, that seemed like they were alluding to something that maybe we would not think that are part of our deen, and they're not. The ayahs immediately following it clarified it, right, and made it very clear what the context was. But Surah Nisa is actually, subhanAllah, one of the few surahs, and there's a tremendous hikmah and wisdom in this too, that has verses that if you can't just read the Quran to understand or to clarify the meaning for some of them, right? These are some of the verses that talk about, the role of women in Islam. Particularly, this whole entire surah was revealed about women in Islam. But it talks about the role of women in Islam. It talks about polygamy. It talks about all of these different things that for so many people, it's almost a shock to them. And we won't go into that because we don't have time for it. And that's something that, there can be questions afterwards if needed. We can also direct you to the right people to answer them. But we'll go into just very high level what some of them are, and the beauty and the wisdom in some of them, right? Before going into that, why Surah Nisa? Right? The fact that there's even a surah called Surah Nisa to combat a lot of the criticisms that people have about Islam being either oppressive towards women, which we know is not true, either being very, even potentially misogynistic, right, towards women, which we know is not true. And all of these other criticisms and complaints, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually sends an entire surah revealed only for the women. And not only that, it's only for the women, but it is actually for some part of it addressed towards the men, not even the women. And there's several ayahs that we'll go through. Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa, right? One of them that some people are always very curious about, that men are the protectors of women. And we know, Islamically speaking, there is the concept that men do have certain roles and women do have certain roles, and that we define morality and that we define equality by the definition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines it by, not the way that society defines it by. But that also inherently means that that definition is more just than the way that society defines it by. And so when we look at that ayah, that men are the protectors of women, what is it exactly saying? Right? Is it saying that, because some people misuse this, right? Some people misuse this verse. But the reality is that this was a surah that was revealed at a time when women were completely mistreated, were seen as commodities, had no rights, and before, and for anybody who's done a tafsir of this, recognizes that Islam was the first champion of speaking for women and providing them rights far before, the Western Hemisphere ever even thought about that as a concept, right? And so this is one of those verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, not to give men authority over women necessarily, but also to say that you men have been treating your women so bad for so long that I actually have to spell this out and recite or reveal a verse in regards to it. Right? That men aren't just cohabitants, or they're not just they're not just cohabitants, but they're also not just they're as superiors, right? But they're protectors. There's a very big difference, right? Especially in a time when you're talking about superiority versus now you have an obligation that you are going to be questioned about on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Right? And the verse continues and it talks about, the rest of the surah also talks about the responsibilities, right? That just when you're a protector of somebody, you are not an authoritarian over them. You're not a dictator over them, but rather you have a responsibility to provide for them. And this is at a time, and not much has changed today. Right? You see the same thing happening today where people use this as a means to say that, to claim superiority over maybe their wives or maybe over their daughters, right? Saying that I provide for you, now you have to listen to me. When the reality is that's the bare minimum that you have to do. The bare minimum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that you provide, and it's not even something that you can, claim that you did out of just the goodness of your own heart, because this is something that's mandated for you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so several examples that we have throughout this surah in regards to the status of women, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is restoring the dignity, restoring the honor towards women when they didn't really have the ability to speak authoritatively for themselves. At a time when it was so male dominated, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala focused on several things in the surah. He begins, a significant part about it is about domestic affairs, right? How men and women should behave in their homes. The second part of it, of the surah is, or even throughout the surah, tends to talk about communal responsibilities, right? And so some of the other examples that we can share, right? Another ayah in this surah is وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. He's saying that he's commanding the men, saying that you stay with your wives in goodness and in kindness. And that if you dislike them, if you find something of fault in them, right, then perhaps this is the ayah that most of us know, that you may dislike something in which there's tremendous good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in it for you. And he's actually using women as the example for this, right? It's not vice versa. And there's a tremendous wisdom in that. Some other examples that we can end with, and we'll keep these a little bit more brief, inshallah, so most people can get a chance to finish the rest of the juz and read Tarawih on their own, but we can go for a few more minutes. Alluding back to what we had began this on, right? That this is one of those surahs that if you read it just in its meaning, it's very difficult to truly understand the message it's conveying, right? And and we can never know the true hikmah in that, but part of the hikmah in that is to weed out the people who truly want to understand, right, that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to them, versus people who are looking for an excuse to find fault. And people who truly do want to understand, it's very easy for them to understand the context in which a lot of these verses were revealed. And when you look at the fact that you can't look at the Quran in a vacuum, but that the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was the embodiment of the Quran, right? That he was the walking Quran. There's not a single verse that if you're confused, that you can interpret without looking at the life and how the Prophet ﷺ enacted those verses. And we know that this is somebody who had the most beautiful of character, and there are far too many hadith to quote about his status, the status of not only the women in his life, but the status in general, right, of women in Islam, and how he, in a time where men were so afraid to, not even afraid, were too proud to speak of love, this was someone who proclaimed his love to the world of his wives, right, who proclaimed the love that he had for Khadija and Aisha to the rest of the world. This was somebody who said that the best of men are the ones who are best to your women, right? Or the best to your families, even in other hadith, right? This was somebody who you can't find a single example, and this is so incredibly profound, because this is somebody who had arguably the most difficult of jobs in the entirety of existence, right? But you cannot find a single example in his life of a time he ever raised his voice in argumentation or raised his hand towards his wives, right? So how can anyone dare claim for any sort of reason whatsoever that any type of disrespect to anybody is something that our deen could allow remotely, when it was revealed by the one who had the most beautiful of character, that was sent as a mercy to mankind. And so, you know, that is one of probably the biggest lessons that we can learn, because subhanAllah, 1400 years later, that not much has changed. And, you know, Muslim world aside, right, that we know that this is something that is starting to be a prevalent theme, of allowing women to champion their own voices and allowing them to champion their own rights in 2020 today, right? That's something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed for women over 1400 years ago. And then the last thing I just want to end with while we're on this theme, because, and I've shared this with many of you before, but it's one of the most beautiful examples that stuck with me from one of my teachers, Ustada Aisha, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on her and increase her and allow her to continue to be a source of light for other people. But, you know, the fact that in Arabic, every word is derived from another word, right? So every word is somehow tangentially connected in meaning to another word. And we know that Rahmah, that we talked about 2 days ago, is the foundation of everything in Islam, right? One of the most beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that there is also a beauty in the fact that the womb of a woman is named Rahim, right? Also derived from Rahmah. And there's several ways that you can look into this, right? There's several meanings you can derive from this. We know that the Prophet ﷺ said that, you know, Jannah is under the feet of your mother, right? But the fact that the word for the womb is derived from Rahim also shows, or derived from Rahmah also shows that women are one of the few actual connections that we have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, actually directly. And let me explain what I mean by that, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to write something into existence, right? When he wants to write your children into existence, when he wants to write, you know, even your parents that you have or your grandparents into existence, the example that, you know, Ustad Aisha had given, the Malcolm X's into existence, the Muhammad Ali's into existence, the prophets into existence, they came from the womb. And so the act of writing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the unseen and to the seen, that nobody has knowledge of, the vessel for that is through the womb. The vessel for that is through the Rahim. And so the reality is that none of us would have families, none of us would have children, or none of us would have spouses, or none of us would potentially have even a boss to work for, or a prophet to learn from, or teachers to learn from, except for the women in our lives. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to recognize that. And we ask him to allow us to elevate the status of the women in our lives and to treat them the way that they deserve to, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines for them to be treated. And we ask him to bless them and to put barakah into their lives, to relieve any burden or calamity that may be in the lives of our mothers, of our sisters, of our teachers. And we ask him to allow us to internalize the actions by which we draw near to him and by which we embody the character traits of the Prophet ﷺ. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakallah khair to everyone for joining again. Before we end, the last thing that we mentioned we'll try to do every single night is for the kids announce the winners, right, for the quiz questions. For the past 2 days, because I forgot about it the day before, for the first question from I think 2 days ago is Majid Abdul Karim. And then for the second question is both Ariz and Aish. And so we're keeping track of all the kids that we all give cards to, and we'll find a way to get it to you, inshallah. And then for the question for today, for them, is this will be very general. And remember, for the kids, that the winner is the one who has the most complete answer, right? And so both, maybe this one can be a little bit of extra credit, right? Both of what we talked about today and outside, right, of things that you know. The question is, what are some of the examples by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has elevated the role of or praised women in Islam? A very simple question. So let's see who can give the most elaborate answer, inshallah. And with that, we'll end. Jazakallah khair for joining. Assalamu alaikum.